Hello and welcome back to another video on Coast to Coast Hockey. Today we're going to be taking a look at what Finland's roster will look like at the upcoming Four Nations Faceoff tournament. I'm Cameron.
I'm Noel.
And I'm Nick. Today we're going to be looking through the forward lines, the D pairings, and the goaltenders, as well as a full roster breakdown at the end if you wish to skip.
Let's get into it. Starting off with our first line here, lots of similarities here, of course. If you want to get us going to start, Nick.
Sure. One of the key differences I have between your first lines and my first line is Rupe Hintz at first left wing. I put him here specifically because I've watched him closely in Dallas, and I like him better as a free-flying winger rather than a shutdown centerman. I think Alexander Barkov is the perfect complementary piece to Rupe Hintz, being able to feed him the puck in transition. Rupe Hintz is kind of like a gazelle. He just kind of starts the engines and keeps going. He'll fly through the neutral zone, sometimes going offside, waiting for the pass to come, and if he doesn't get the pass, he's sort of out of the play. So I think that best suits him as a winger. And then Mikko Rantanen could be the finisher on this line.
Yeah, Rupe Hintz is arguably the best winger behind Mikko Rantanen, but I just kind of decided to spread the wealth out a bit more between lines. So I went with the no-brainer Mikko Rantanen and Barkov, but where might be a bit of a strange pick and off the board, and may have to have an asterisk on it actually, is Patrick Laine with right wing. So right now he is in the player assistance program and has not played since early on in the season, and when he did not look good. So I'm just kind of banking on a healthy return to the season next year, and he absolutely pops off and regains his place as a top line winger. And the only place on this roster for him is on the top line or in a top six role, playing with elite players. He's not a good bottom line player, a grinder, forechecker. He's more of a skill sniper, and pairing him with like amazing players like Rantanen and Barkov is a no-brainer. So that's just if he has a good start to the season and is looking like the line that we know. I believe he's the right fit on that first line.
Yeah, I thought you were about to say the no-brainer was Patrick Laine, and I was gonna have a little chuckle. But all joking aside, we wish him the best, certainly. And on top of that, this is a guy with pedigree who scored 40 goals before in the NHL. So if he's able to get himself back up to that past form, then he makes total sense here. So not going to knock that. Just very optimistic of Noel, which I personally like. So for me, the guy I have that's different on this line is Artturi Lehkonen. I really like him with Mikko Rantanen because these guys have familiarity playing together in Colorado. Lehkonen's a guy who last year put up 21 goals, 51 points in, I believe, 64 games or something around there. So for me, it's just kind of same idea of spreading out the wealth a little bit, but with a guy who has played with Mikko Rantanen. And to me, Barkov is in debate for the best Finnish player out there with Rantanen and Heiskanen, who we'll talk about later. But I believe it was Matthew Tkachuk said he's the most skilled player he's ever played with. So absolute no-brainer to have him as the first line center here. And then I have a bit of a guy with some tenacity in Lehkonen and, like you said, the finisher in Rantanen, Nick. So I'm very happy with this line, and they got some great options here for the first line. Moving on to the second line, this is where we start to see some maybe some lesser quality players start to appear. So if you want to kick us off here, Nick.
Yeah, for sure. So as you can see, both of you guys put Rupe Hintz in this position on the second line, which is totally fair. I chose Matias Michelli. I believe Michelli has grown into a super effective player on an Arizona team that is pretty weak around the edges. So he has to sort of carry the load alongside guys like Clayton Keller, Nick Schmaltz, and co. So I think him as a playmaker alongside Sebastian Aho and Teravainen works really well. Aho and Teravainen, all of us had that same connection from Carolina. I think Teravainen still has it. I believe that in past times with Chicago and early Carolina days, he had a bit of a time to figure out who he is as a player. And I think as he becomes more of a shooter and less of a passer, it'll benefit him greatly. So him with Aho and Michelli, I see just three high skilled guys going to play in the corners, going to get out to the middle of the ice and try to bury the putt biscuit.
Yeah, Teravainen started off the season very well. He's kind of cooled off a bit recently, but I just think having him with Sebastian Aho, who is the clear-cut second line center behind Barkov, just makes sense. They already have that connection, and then putting Rupe Hintz there, as we mentioned, kind of just balances out the lines a bit more, and he can absolutely fly. So, I mean, Sebastian and Aho are quick by all means, but they aren't really known for their speed. So, having the speeds to Rupe Hintz, who they can hit in transition, really makes sense.
Yeah, for me, when I reference weaker players, I'm specifically talking about Teravainen here. He's a great player, but he's not sniffing the top six on any of these other teams, in my personal opinion. But my methodology is to have kind of duos of on the first line we had Rantanen and Barkov. Here we've got Hintz and Aho. So again, two incredibly skilled players. Hintz we've said a lot about already. I love him, and I'm happy to have him on the wing, a position he's played before. As for Sebastian Aho, this guy is an absolute stud, two-way centerman who's done it in the playoffs before, and he gives them a formidable 1-2 punch down the center with Barkov. So their center depth in the first two lines is able to go at it with, I think, anybody in this tournament. It's kind of the other places where we're going to start to see this is going to be one of the weaker teams in this tournament.
Yeah, and one key point about the top six of Finland, I do think this top six can still compete with any of the teams in this tournament, albeit all three guys don't equal the same guys of the three Team Canada second liners or what have you. But I do think that certain pairings, certain duos will be able to sort of exploit certain lineups in certain situations, such as Aho and Teravainen with the chemistry that they might have from Carolina. So it'll be interesting to see how well they can transition this to a tournament with full of superstars compared to just the normal NHL game days.
Yeah, we're probably going to continually reference that this is one of the weaker teams in this tournament. But at the end of the day, these short tournaments, it's often about who can come together as a team the best. So they might not be the sum of their parts so much, and just take what they look like on paper with a grain of salt here. So with that said, moving on to the third line here, if you want to kick us off again, Nick.
Yeah, absolutely. So some people have Arturi Lehkonen as the top six grinder. I have him sort of as the third line grinder. I believe in a high skill top six over the idea of the bully, sort of the F1 who challenges the forechecking. So I have Lehkonen, Granlund, and Tolvanen as my line here. Tolvanen specifically has grown into a great complementary piece in Seattle. I don't believe he is nearly a top six option for any of these teams, but he has grown into a quite the good shooter and quite the good power play two option. Mikael Granlund has been very consistent, and I've watched him in San Jose this year on a team with really no support be sort of the one guy to dominate as well as Duclair before he got traded. So Granlund being a guy that can actually hold his own and be that third line center alongside Lehkonen and Tolvanen, this line will never quit, basically.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to say about these guys on the third line. We talked about balancing the lineup in terms of depth, so having Arturi Lehkonen as a third line option just makes that third line even stronger. He's probably the best player on this line, in my opinion. Granlund's having a good year on a terrible San Jose team that Nick mentioned, so it's just kind of a no-brainer to have him there. And I really do enjoy watching Matias Maccelli play. Spit and Chicklets uses the term water bug. When he's skating, he can move around in ways that like not many guys can. So having that elite skating on the third line just gives them a good look.
Yeah, I do like the idea of Lehkonen as a third liner. My only thing is that I think he plays really well with good players personally, so that's why I moved him up to the top six. As for Michelli, like him, he's a great playmaker. I do wish I had somebody with a little bit more ability of puck retrieval there, but unfortunately, we're given what we have for this team. As for Mikael Granlund, this is a guy who I was a little bit annoyed about the fact that his name was getting dragged through the mud so much in Pittsburgh when he just had a few bad months. And this guy, like you said, Nick, has been consistent his entire career in San Jose in a expanded role. He's back up to putting up great assist totals. So great playmaker here. And on his wing, we have the sniper, Eli Tolvanen. We're talked about waiver claims in the Sweden video. What a waiver claim here for the Seattle Kraken. This guy could put up 20 or 30 goals in a given year. So very happy to have him on this third line. And I think he's a young player who could end up moving up this lineup as well in the future. Now moving on to Finland's fourth line. A little bit of a mixed bag here for a tournament like this. If you want to kick us off again, Nick.
Yeah, for sure. So one consistent piece to each of our fourth lines is Erik Haula. I believe Erik Haula is one of the most versatile forwards in the NHL when tasked with playing in multiple different teams throughout his career, multiple different situations, playoffs, regular season, bottom six, middle six. I think he can play anywhere with any person. So I think that Erik Haula is a good piece to this fourth line, and it's such a short time to plan and prepare for such a tournament.
Yeah, Nick talked about Eric Holla. Cam will get into Luosterainen, so that leaves my fourth line right winger and Jesse Puljujarvi. He's bounced around the league a bit since being selected fourth overall in 2016, but he does still have some skill, and he's shown some flashes of it with Pittsburgh. He's kind of looked a bit better there since coming over. He also has had some success in international tournaments before for Finland in the World Juniors. So you really can't go, or there's really a lot of options you could have with these fourth line, and you could really plug in any of these players or just players that even we don't have on here. It's kind of as Cam said, a mixed bag of players. So really a lot of options that you could have.
I like how you stopped yourself from saying you can't go wrong, Noel, because
Yeah,
this isn't the teams we've
you
looked at
could go
before.
wrong with this fourth line.
Yeah, unfortunately. But for me, I was just trying to build the best fourth line I could because this is going to have to be a team. They're not going to outskill these other teams. So that for me is why I went with a guy like Holla, as we all have him. Great veteran, lots of playoff experience, plays with a little bit of grit as well. And Luosterainen, who's a tall, rangy guy who's able to play on the PK, plays with a little bit of physicality as well too. So makes sense in a fourth line role. He's also got a little bit of offensive upside with 43 points a season ago. So really like this player who's played a good defensive role on one of the top defensive teams in the NHL in the Florida Panthers. And then Lindell, a little bit more skilled than these other guys possibly, and makes sense here on the fourth line as well. He's one of the best Finnish players, so he's going to be here. There's not much else to say about that. So now moving on to Finland's D-core. Pretty no-brainer here on the left D side if you want to kick us off there, Nick.
Absolutely. So Miro Heiskanen is one of the best defensemen in the NHL, and he also is pretty much the best Finnish defenseman, active Finnish defenseman right now. This guy can play in all situations, will play upwards of 25, 26, close to 30 sometimes a night. So on a Finland team with weaker defensive options than other opponents, I think that Miro Heiskanen will have to take a lot of the load, and that's why we have him here at lefty number one.
Yeah, Heiskanen is probably the only player in this decor that could crack the other nation's defensive units. He's a absolute stud on the backhand, very smooth skater, and I just paired him with Rasmus Ristolainen, and he's kind of the most name brand recognition of the other defensemen that Finland has to offer. So I just thought might as well pair them together.
Yeah, for me, I had Ristolainen here and I battled with it for a while. I decided to go with Henri Jokiharju because at the end of the day, this line is going to be called on a lot. And I really don't want a guy who I don't trust as much in Ristolainen out here with Heiskanen. I want Heiskanen to be able to play his game and play with a guy who's responsible in his own right and is able to kind of eat those minutes and take on the toughest matchups with him. So that's why I didn't go with Ristolainen here. A bit more of a fan of Jokiharju, who plays on the Sabres. But I don't mind this pair as far as first pair in this tournament goes. Moving on to the second pair. This is where we start to see a bit more difference here. So if you want to kick us off with your second pair, Nick.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have Henri Jokiharju on my second pair. I really like both him and Ristolainen as right-handed options for Finland because, there aren't that many right-handed options for these teams. However, I have Jokiharju on the second pair to pair with Esa Lindell. I think Esa Lindell is a bit more stable than Miro Heiskanen as a defensive option. Miro Heiskanen sometimes plays a bit of a high-risk, high-reward defensive play where he tries to take it all himself because he thinks he has to. On this team, he will think he has to because he's the only guy with the ability to transition with the puck. So that's why I have Ristolainen waiting with him, and I have Jokiharju, who might be a little bit more high risk, with Esa Lindell, who could be that stable backhand piece.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I'm not too familiar with both of these defensemen, and that really says something. If you have someone that's making hockey YouTube videos and is not familiar with defensemen on your second pair, that's not a very good look. What I do know about Mikkola, he's played for Florida and the Rangers recently, who are both been playoff contenders since he's been playing for them. So that just says something about his defensive game. He's a valuable piece on a good team. And Jokiharju, Cam mentioned he's looked good on a pretty poor Buffalo team. So might as well have him filling out that second pair.
Yeah, for me with Mikkola, the reason he cracks the top four here for me and on the Finland team is because I was a bit of a Mikkola doubter, I would say, when he was traded from St. Louis to New York. I wasn't familiar with his game, you could say. And he didn't really get a big role in New York. But when he signed in Florida for 2.5 million, I think I probably said in our preseason video that was probably a bit of an overpay. And to be honest, so far it hasn't been, because to start off the year with all those injuries, he was playing top 4 minutes and he was excelling in them. So for me, it's just that experience there with Florida, who, as we've said before, is one of the top defensive teams in the NHL. His ability to play top 4 minutes on that team has given me the confidence that he'll be able to play top 4 minutes on Team Finland. And that hopefully compensates a little bit for the lack of trust I have in Rasmus Ristolainen. That might be partially misplaced, but he's just never really been on a good team. So I don't really trust him in the big moments personally. So he's going to be on this team. He's one of the top 4 Finnish defensemen, which, like we've said, maybe isn't saying a great deal, but having him and Mikkola, I think, kind of balances each other out with a bit more of a defensive guy and a bit more of a risk taker, as Nick has called some of the other defensemen as well. Moving on to the third pair. Again, just total superstars on this third pair here. So why don't you start us off again, Nick?
Yeah, absolutely. So Yusuf Valimaki has taken a bit in his career to find who he is as a player, and I don't think he was given enough of a leash in Calgary personally. I think that he deserved sort of a better fate. But now he's in Arizona with a chance to actually play every night and play in minutes that are considered important to that team. Despite Arizona's struggles this season, I think Valimaki is one of the bright spots, and I like him as the third pair left defense option in a bit of a sheltered role. You can honestly argue that there won't be any sheltering because you're going to be playing against 4 lines of superstars for most other teams, but at the same time, it's better than being lefty number 1. On the right, I got Jani Hakanpää, another Dallas Star, with 3 Dallas Stars taking up my top 6 in the defensive side. I think Jani Hakanpää is a bit of a question mark. Most of all, I think that he has some issues in transition, so hopefully he just starts in the D zone like he usually does. He starts the D zone 72% of the time, so his offensive zone start percentage is 28, compared to a guy like Mikkola on Florida on a top team, which starts in the O zone 53% of the time. So Hakanpää starting basically twice as much of his faceoffs in the D zone, to me, signifies that with pretty decent numbers for a third pair guy that's not supposed to be that top guy, is fine for me on the third pair as a right shot as well.
For me, I just paired 2 Dallas guys together who hopefully have some chemistry together and know each other in Esa Lindell and Hakanpää. Not much to say on Lindell. I do question Hakanpää's foot speed a bit, and I wonder if he's going to have some trouble with the really top-end talent in this tournament. But with not a lot of other options to go with, I just thought pairing these 2 together made sense.
Yeah, as Noel alluded to with the foot speed, I'm petrified of Hakanpää getting walked by a guy like McDavid or Jack Hughes, any of the above. So for me, I had him on my team. Last minute took him off because I decided I have my big physical guy in Mikkola, who I think is a bit more prepared to handle those tough matchups. Whereas Hakanpää, I was just looking at I really was not sure which way to go with this decor, so I took a look at some advanced metrics. He had pretty poor advanced metrics, so that's why he kind of fell out of favor in my opinion, for this lineup. But as for Lindell, another guy who doesn't have great advanced metrics, but he has the pedigree of being a top 4 defensive defenseman in the NHL for at least over half a decade at this point. So he's going to be on this team. And Olli Määttä is a guy who might surprise some people, but this is a guy who's won 2 Stanley Cups with the Pittsburgh Penguins. He's played 85 playoff games, and he's played 66 games this year with the Detroit Red Wings. He's also capable of playing left or right D. So I think this is a guy who Finland is going to have to bring to this tournament for numerous reasons. And to me, he just leapfrogged Valimaki because he's able to play on his offside on the right. And as for Valimaki, this is a player I really like. He's going to be my spare, as you'll see later on. It's just the pedigree of Lindell is what has him slotted above him at this point. Moving on to the saving grace for the Finland team, and that is the goaltender. And yes, I mean that singularly. If you want to start us off here, Nick.
For sure. So there's a bit of symmetry you can see with our starter and backup. We've got Jussi Saros, one of the best goaltenders in the NHL, as well as Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, who has also turned out to be one of the best goaltenders in the NHL this season. I've had a lot of faith in him since his brief time in Sudbury in the OHL. I did think he was going to pan out. He had some great AHL time, and now has made his way onto a team that really needs him to be a good goaltender, and he has been in Buffalo. So these 2 guys being your goaltenders on a team that seems to be weak in other areas is really, really helpful. As you said, saving grace is a good way to put it, where they might face a lot of shots. So these guys do well with a lot of shots, though, so I do like the options here in net.
Yeah, you really don't want to overthink it. UC Saros is definitely the best option for Finland in net. He's kind of an X factor, if you will, for them. He could really make or break their tournament. UPL has come off, he's really emerged onto the scene this year. He's posted some great numbers in Buffalo. He's kind of started off the year rough, but has really picked it up since 2024. As for my extra, I have Ville Husso. Again, he's been injured a lot this year and hasn't looked that great, but he has had some strong previous years, and I'm counting on a good bounce back. But I really don't think Ville Husso will be seeing the ice much. It's really Saros's net and then UPL as the clear cut backup.
Yeah, for me, Saros is one of the top, definitely top 10, possibly even top five goaltenders in the NHL right now. So to have him here is, like I said, this is make or break for Team Finland. Uh, Unlike other teams, they don't have the high skill talent on defense or on offense. So this is the guy who, if he plays lights out, he could lead Team Finland to some wins. So unbelievable for them to have that option there. Better than some other teams for sure. As for Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, this is a guy who Noel said has broken out this year. He's got a 910 save percentage in 49 games on the Buffalo Sabres. To me, that's incredible. The Buffalo Sabres are one of the bottom feeders in the NHL, and Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen has a 910 save percentage in almost 50 games. So it's a big sample size, and he's playing unreal. So this is a guy you're totally fine with coming in if Saros goes down or needs a break of some kind. But there's no way, in my opinion, that he's going to take that starting role unless there's some sort of miracle. As for my third string goaltender, I went for Korpisalo, a guy who has some playoff experience with the Kings, albeit brief. But really, the way I saw it is this is a guy who last year had a 913 on Columbus. And then as soon as he got traded to the Kings, that went up to a 921. So to me, that just shows this is a guy who, if he's got a good team in front of him, he's able to stop some shots here and there. So stopgap third option. But as far as the rest of the options go, this is the guy I decide to go with.
At one point on Saros, if the tournament actually happened this spring instead of next spring, UC Saros would be coming off a strong national run where they won 15 plus games in a row without losing in regulation. So if we had an informed Saros this month, for example, that'd be quite the tournament to watch.
Yeah, for sure. He's definitely one of the elite goaltenders in the NHL, and this is a guy who I think was underrated for a number of years, and I think he's finally starting to be shifted over to that properly rated territory where he's finally getting his due, even in a less media-centric market like Nashville. So great option there as your number one goaltender. Moving on to the whole roster view here. As you can see, this graphic shows who we decided to bring as our spares, as well as who we've pegged to be the leaders of this team. So for me, I chose Jesperi Kotkaniemi and Juuso Välimäki, two guys who I think can fill in pretty much anywhere in the lineup need be in their respective positions. Kotkaniemi is a guy who was drafted third overall, so he's got that pedigree, and I really don't mind if he's playing anywhere in the top six, and not a fan of him in the bottom six, but obviously you can rearrange if need be.
Yeah, as for my extras, I included Lundell and Välimäki. These guys have spoke about Välimäki, and I think he has some high upside, but it's kind of could be a glass cannon. He could really come back to bite them if he ends up getting some games. And then Lundell is, I guess I compared Välimäki to a glass cannon. And Lundell's a Swiss Army knife. I'm really going about the weapons here. Lundell can kind of slot in anywhere. If there's a player struggling or someone goes down to injury, I think he's a great player to have as an extra.
And on my end, I picked Capo Caco. I think that in a logjam team like the New York Rangers, where he's sort of not able to spread his wings as much as he might like, I think that maybe on this kind of team, if he gets a role to play alongside some superstars, maybe that will help. I mean, he's already playing with some decent players in New York, but I just wonder in a year's time, will his growth continue?
As for the leadership group we all selected, we all have Barkov as the captain. I think that's a no-brainer. This is a guy who's the consummate professional in the NHL. Everybody speaks highly of him. So to me, that's a no-brainer. I have Mikko Rantanen as an assistant captain. For me, that's just because this guy's won a Stanley Cup and he's one of the best to do it right now as a Finnish player. And then I have Miro Heiskanen as an assistant captain as well. This is a guy who's gone on a Stanley Cup final run. And again, he's the best player at his position for Team Finland.
Yeah, Cam spoke about my two assistants. Nick, do you have anything about Aho there?
Yeah, I specifically chose him instead of Rantanen because in closely watching Colorado in Western Conference matchups, I've seen a bit of a nasty sort of reputation out of him where he's similar to Leon Draisaitl in the sense where he doesn't let plays go. If he gets hit, he's going to cross check you back. This is fine in the grand scheme of things, but I just think that I don't want my assistant captain in the box the whole game or just mad that he's the fourth best team in the 4-team tournament. So I thought Sebastian Aho, a bit more calm, more professional player, would better fit the assistant captain. But in the end, it doesn't really matter. Assistant captain on a team in a Four-Nation tournament that might be a bit short of a tournament rather than just a full season I think it's fine.
Yeah. 4 great options there anyways. I think it's pretty safe to bet it'll be combination of those 4 of some sort. So we'll say it again, not probably the best team in the tournament. We'll probably return to that in a future video, but at the end of the day, this is a team that is going to stay in games with these other teams. So that's really all they can ask for. And on top of that, this is a nation that has a lot of great young players coming up through the pipeline. So this is a team that you're going to see get a lot better in coming years. So do not worry, Finnish hockey fans. The future is bright.
Yeah, one more point I want to make. I have no sources to back this up at all, but I just feel like Finland is a really good system team. I trust their coaching staff from what I've seen in international tournaments, so I feel like they'd be able to get the most out of this somewhat lackluster group.
So that's basically going to do it for this video. Make sure to keep an eye out for future videos upcoming on the channel where we might take a look at some teams who aren't going to be at this tournament, what they might look like if they were, as well as kind of a prediction of who's going to win the tournament later on. So keep an eye out for that as well as some other videos to come. So please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe and let us know who you'd have on your Team Finland.